What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today's video is on this John Deere X300. The customer complaint on this was that it just continued to die. Sometimes you could run it for quite a while and then it would start to cough and sputter and die. Sometimes you would start it basically for 10 seconds and it would die. So intermittent, but basically the main thing was that it was dying. Long story short, narrowed it down to not getting fuel. And so another shop had it before me and tried a number of times through different things, a fuel pump, inspecting the carburetor, a fuel filter, checking the fuel line, and basically any of their tests were inconclusive. So I want to show you what I did to find the problem and how I'm going to fix it. So I should mention, I've got the mower pulled apart much further than you need to for your own testing, so sort of ignore that. You don't have to take the engine cover off like I have here. You don't even need to unbolt your fuel pump or take your hood off. So what we're going to do is just disconnect the incoming fuel hose, which is right here, and it runs back to the filter. So you'll use your right angle needle nose to pull that clamp down and take the line off. You want to also loosen the fuel cap, and also ignore this for now that I have the body lifted up, but I'll explain that in a second. So you'll unscrew your fuel cap and then go ahead and blow in this line, and it's not hooked up right now, but what you'll hear if you're able to blow air through this line is you'll be able to hear it bubbling in the tank. And that's a good thing. If you hear bubbling in the tank, this line is not blocked. If you don't hear bubbling in the tank, you have an issue somewhere along your fuel line, and it takes a pretty easy route running right up on top of the deck and then up and over the tank in the wheel well. So you can kind of investigate on your own if that's the case. But my guess is that it's not, and so I'm going to continue on and explain the next part of the test. The next part of the test is if you do hear bubbles, now go ahead and try to create a suction on this line. And so if you're sucking on this line and you can't, which is what happened to me, that explains our problem. So we have a blockage, but in my case it was not part of the fuel line, and I'll show you where it was at. So if you're able to blow on this line and hear bubbling in the tank, but you can't form a suction and get any fuel, then I'll show you what's next. So the next step of the process is to lift our body just slightly, and I'm going to show you how that's done. What you're going to do is lift the seat up. There are two 10mm bolts on each side of the seat, right here and right here. So you can remove those, take off your fuel cap, and then come to the front underneath the floorboard, and there's a 1/2-inch bolt, or nut rather, right there. Remove that nut, and then come around to this side, same thing, right up where you see that stud there is another 1/2-inch nut. So you'll remove that, and the last thing is to take a pry bar and gently pry your deck adjustment knob off. It just pops straight up and out. And what that will allow you to do is lift up the body in the rear like this. And I've just taken a block of wood on each side from the tire up to the fender to hold this up out of my way. And that gives me access to my sending unit and my pickup tube in the fuel tank. So what you're going to do is cut your fuel line. Actually, I take that back. You don't have to cut your fuel line. In my case, I did, so that I can remove the whole sending unit from the tractor. And I'm just going to reattach that with like a 1/2-inch hose barb. But you don't have to. So what that's going to do is allow us access to our sending unit here. You'll disconnect this electrical connector, which is your fuel level wiring. And then I'll show you the sending unit itself and how to disconnect that from the tank. Here's what it's going to look like. And all you need to do is this is held in here with an O-ring right there, and then there's a cap piece or a ring that goes over the top and locks into these notches. So you just take a flat screwdriver and gently pry at the bottom of this notch, and then get one more, and that should be good. You can pry it up and out, and then you pull it off of the fuel line like that. Once you have that, you can lift this sending unit up and out of the tank. And this will show you the problem. From the factory, there's no filter or screen on the bottom of this pickup tube. And this pickup tube was getting clogged or stopped up and stopping my fuel flow. So I want to show you the repair that I'm going to use, or some different options that you can try for yourself to see if you can solve that problem. So here's what I plan to try. What I've got here is I've cut this plastic dip tube down just slightly, enough to account for my filter here. And what this filter is something that I get with a number of carburetors I order that go on generators. This is a thread-in filter, and it just has a little screen on the bottom of it, you can see there. And I've just used some heat shrink to shrink that to my dip tube. This is just one idea, but basically what we're shooting for here is to add a filter screen at the bottom of our dip tube and keep our overall length about the same. Originally my dip tube went just below the bottom of the assembly here, and that's what I've duplicated with the screen. So now I'm simply going to dip this back down into the tank and reconnect my fuel hose. I'm not going to hook anything else up because I want to be able to test this before I reassemble, but I'll show you how easy this is. And in theory, this is going to make this serviceable. So if in the next years or whatever the case might be, we get plugged up again, we can simply pull this out, pull our filter off, and put a new one on. So anyway, the way that this went on here is our fuel hose is going to pass under this foam. There's a little slot for it, and we can index everything to line up. You can see here on the tank there's a groove where your fuel hose runs, so that shows you what direction it sits. And we want to make sure to put our lock ring back on before we go too far. I actually went a little bit too far. So the way this lock ring goes is it runs down over the fuel hose, and you also have to tuck your electrical up through the lock ring. Doing this one-handed. And then once you get everything in place, the lock ring is indexed right here, and it'll just push down and snap in. So we'll get everything lined up. Something about like so. Push our fuel pump down, and it's also indexed so that it only lines up in that notch right there. And now we line up our lock ring. Should hear 4 clicks. We got 3 and 4. And now we'll just reattach our electrical up here. And I'll show you what I came up with for my fuel hose. Right here is where I ended up cutting it. And I just slid in a 1/4 inch hose mender, or hose barb. And you can see here, my fuel hose is going to run right back to where it came from. Through there. And we'll simply slide the mender on like so. Give me a second so I can use 2 hands. I'll try to set you guys up. And now if we come back up front, I'll try my same test. If I blow into the fuel line, you can hear the bubbling back there. And if I provide suction, when before I had no suction and my filter was empty, now it fills up and you get a mouthful instantly. So that's a great success. I'm going to reattach my fuel hose, and I'm confident enough I'm going to go ahead and put things back together at this point. But it would be a good idea to go ahead and start the mower up before you bolt your body back down. Not that it's that much work, but you might as well test it while you can, and I'll show you the finished product. We'll go ahead and give it a start. Beforehand, it was dying. Unless I choked it, it was dying instantly, and then even with the choke on full, it would die shortly after. So let's give it a shot here with no choke. Give it just a second with choke while we fill our filter. Well, that's it, guys. Sorry I didn't get a chance to film an outro to that video. Just getting it edited now. That was a good repair. The owner took it home and mowed his whole yard without issue when before it came in he only made it one lap. So yeah, good repair. If you have any questions, make sure to let me know. Otherwise, like and subscribe as always, and I'll see you on the next video.